Totally didn't expect this. So, how would you, how did you get into digital marketing?
Oh, I got into digital marketing by accident. I was going to be a programmer, and I, as a child, learned how to code, and at one point needed to move to Silicon Valley because that's where you go.
Yeah.
Or at least when I was young.
Yeah.
Now you can go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I ended up becoming a database programmer for a technology marketing agency and advertising firm. So I was basically a database architect, and it's early in the days of the rise of tech, and before all of the Web 1.0 stuff, and back when Silicon Valley was hardware and networks and servers, and all of the startups in the world were trying to disrupt those big hardware companies.
Yeah.
I just felt that the way that the agency, when I'd overhear them talking about their strategies and they're creative, and I just always thought, wow, you don't actually know who you're talking to.
Right.
You might be more creative than you are technical, but there's a whole different way of thinking, and there's a whole different way of approach. I'm influenced really differently, especially since I'm at the time younger. I don't just read magazines.
Well, when was this then?
This is, I'm afraid to say, this is in the early 90s, so 91.
Crikey.
And I would tell the president of the agency, maybe this, maybe that, and he said, well, if you know so much, then perhaps you should try it.
Yeah.
And that's how that started. And ended up, one of the benefits was not having a precursor or sort of a bias to how things work, or not having processes that I needed to adhere to. You just sort of invented what you needed in order to make something happen, and then knowing what those metrics needed to be for success. It was almost like a blank slate. It was a blank slate. So when you're gifted an opportunity to start from scratch, and failure is an option, you could be quite inventive and quite creative. And a lot of those things were invented to just so that I could get my job done. And as they became successful, I continued to experiment. And along the way, I felt like it was quite lonely with all of these experimentations. Not everybody was a big supporter, so one of the ways to earn sort of validation and support was to share everything that I was learning. So I started publishing, giving it all away. And that's while I continued to experiment. And a lot of this invented what is modern digital marketing today.
Yeah. Well, I've read your book from cover to cover.
Thank you.
Big fan. What for you was the breakthrough moment in kind of digital disruption? When was that moment where it became quite clear that people need to embrace digital and not resist it?
1997, 1998. That was one of the. There are several milestones to this question, but that was the one. That's the one where I said I am going all in on digital as a way to influence physical. So I was going backwards, whereas digital was always, and still is in many ways, a bolt-on to traditional things. I wanted to go the other way because I've tasted what it was like. I was in forums and message boards, and I've tasted what this whole social revolution was going to look like. And I used those platforms to help launch what would eventually become digital cameras, and what later same techniques would eventually become online photo sharing. Those that was so disruptive when you could see direct to consumer or direct to human engagement. That what you would have to learn, or what you would have to do, or how you'd have to talk, or how you'd have to design differently when you could go to another human being who was so used to only seeing marketers or only seeing advertising, and when a company reached out to them, it was never the most pleasant experience. But it could be. You could be one of their peers. You could become a trusted peer. And that, for me, was one of the first disruptions of which led me on this path. And there's been several since, but I don't think there's enough storage on your camera for that.
Well, maybe. It's a brand new phone, so who knows? But that certainly seems to be the way now. It's either do or die, isn't it? If you don't accept change, if you don't accept digital transformation, then it seems that you'll be left behind. And a lot.
You think so?
Well, I think a few industries still are quite resistant to that kind of change.
Well, this is what my next book is. I'm really trying to zero in on how I articulate this, but the real challenge of innovation is the acceptance of your ability to change.
Yeah.
It starts with the individual. So yes, organizations don't change, but why? Because cultures don't actually promote change, because cultures are designed to manage what you know and you scale it and make it more efficient and profitable. So when you talk about change, you're essentially saying, I need you to absolutely learn something new, unlearn what you know, and do things differently. And by the way, we don't know what that is yet. That's completely disruptive.
Right.
So one of the ways to do that, I think, from a personal level, is to sort of accept what change could look like, starting with, well, what are you trying to do? You start bringing it down to simpler questions. You know, what does change actually mean? That's why I always start with digital anthropology, really looking at how people are changing preferences, values, belief systems, decision making, because that starts to bring to life things that you just didn't know to ask. So now you know what to focus on, and so then change becomes sort of proactive and purposeful, and there's less of a risk and less scary because you actually know what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Great. One last question, I promise. Any predictions for the next this time next year? Is what's going to be different? Well, not in this time next year. Maybe in 5 years' time.
Everything's going to be different in a lot of ways. The more access we have to information, the more I think what I'd like to see happen this time next year. 5 years, that's a whole other conversation.
Right? Yeah, we can't. That's too much.
What I'd like to see happen this time next year is the self-empowerment, and then the self-due diligence, if you will. Of one, stopping the spread of misinformation, and two, qualifying information and being a beacon of truth rather than a beacon of misleading.
Beacon of truth.
Yeah, because I think when you look at the cultural impact of what's happening behind Brexit and the U.S. election, they're two sides of the same coin, and it's just the incredible propagation of misinformation, and then the influence of that misinformation on someone's perception and belief, and then at the same time the inability to retract that stance once you're given the facts. Going this incredible way around what we really all need to do, and that is become better at sharing the right information so that we can actually advance as a society, as a global society, and that's what I hope by this time next year.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Cheers.
Cheers.